So I guess we should define boundaries. I'll kind of give you my couple definition. I think of it as, and I actively have to think of this sometimes when I'm in a situation where I need to define a boundary, is like the fence in my yard, everything in my yard is my boundary. That is like, the fence is the boundary. Everything in my yard is my responsibility. And my neighbor has a fence too around his yard, and everything in his yard is his responsibility. So I'm not going to sneak over if he's not watering his vegetables enough and sneak into his yard to water his vegetables and then not water mine, right? Because one, I'd be trespassing a boundary that he set up. He didn't invite me in. I'm not going to sneak in there and save his vegetables and kill mine. But
yeah, true, huh?
yes. But, you know, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was like a month ago, he came over and he said, your tree's growing in my yard. You know, we need to do something about it because it's going to push the fence in. So I hired someone to cut the tree. So he very respectfully came to me, said, something of mine was trespassing on his property. Let's get it out. Right? And I thought that was handled well. And then his cats sneak into my yard and I send the Yorkie outside to chase them out when they trespass into my yard. So it's a boundary. It's like, it's what's my responsibility, what's his responsibility, and we don't trespass without permission, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Do you have more you want to add to that?
Yeah. So I think like we see boundaries often as like walls and like to keep everything out and shielded. And a lot of people like to shield everything from coming in. But boundaries should be fences with gates where you allow the good things to come in and keep the bad things from coming in. And boundary problems occur when you don't use that gate properly. So I'm going to give you guys 4 boundary problems. They're going to show you what to kind of look for in yourself and others when you see a boundary problem arise, or you kind of get that body feeling that there's a boundary problem near. So with the first one I like to mention, and that's the one that me and Mom, and I feel like Nicole is a little bit, are compliant people. So we can't say no.
We can now.
We can now, but to be a compliant means you have a hard time saying no, and you can't say yes, or you end up saying yes to the bad. And it's mostly because you fear what would happen if you did say no. You're afraid of losing your relationship, or fear of hurting their feelings or the conflict because you can't handle it, you know? So for example, you know, you're in a relationship and you know, your partner says like, do you want to do this thing? And you don't want to do it, and it's invading your personal boundaries. If you say yes, even though you don't want to, you're being compliant to that person, right? So, and you're going against your own needs, and you would end up feeling resentment in the long term towards that person because you didn't stick up for your own needs, and you feel like it's their fault that you aren't getting what you need. And for an example as well, with the gate analogy, this is, you know, allowing the bad to come in through the gate.
So a lot of people, I think, with sexual trauma, right, would have a hard time deciphering that.
Yeah.
Or like because what was bad, let's say you were abused as a child for many, many years. You are always letting bad in and keeping good out. It becomes a programming that would be hard to change.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just hard to understand this because you got to be bold and brave a little bit in these moments that you need to stick up for yourself. And when you're not used to doing that, it's like, it's difficult.
Well, and when you've been trained not to.
Yeah. It takes bravery and a lot of courage at first. And then it starts to become a little bit natural, you know. The next one I want to cover is avoidant. And this is the second boundary problem. These people can't say yes, and they struggle to say yes. So they end up saying no to the good, even if it's good for them. And they fear what would happen if they did say yes. So would it interrupt their pride? You know, would it somehow affect their ego and how they want to, you know?
I can't relate to this one.
Yeah.
I don't even know how this works. What do you mean? Like,
so
do you have a person or like in our family that would do this? Is Dad this way?
He can be, you know.
He can be, where like his instant answer is no.
Yeah.
And then until he thinks about it.
So you want to hire somebody to come fix the dishwasher.
Okay.
His pride would say, no, don't do that.
Oh, yep.
So
yeah, it's definitely a
he would
pride
say
thing.
yes to him doing it himself, right?
Yes.
and no to the good person because he might not know how to fix that dishwasher. It's saying no to that person,
Okay.
the good, to come into fix it
the
and help,
house.
right?
Yes, because he
So-
doesn't want a stranger in his house.
Another reason might be like vulnerability, like your fear of vulnerability. Like you've been hurt so many times in the past that it's easier to just put a shell up to allow anybody to come in. You
And
see
to
that
do
a lot in,
everything
like,
yourself.
You see that in a lot of movies and stuff, you know. And to go back to the gate example, you know, this is keeping good from coming in the gate. So, and then the third boundary problem is controllers, and they can't hear no. So this is the other flip side of these boundary problems. They don't respect the boundaries of others, and they see your no as a challenge to overcome that no, and to push your boundaries, and because they want
They
what they
seek
want.
compliant people
Yeah.
probably to connect with.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a funny, interesting relationship that those two have. So say in the example that I mentioned earlier about relationships, and my partner was wanting me to do something that I didn't want to do, and I was being compliant and saying yes to it because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. If I decided to say no to it and my partner was like, what the heck, man? Like, you never do anything for me. That would be a controlling statement. That would be a controlling,
A manipulatively controlling statement.
that would be a controlling boundary problem.
Emotionally manipulative.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, and not saying
I've
that
had
you
that
do
happen
that,
to me.
you know what I mean?
No.
I know.
Yeah, it was just for example.
Or
And so
you never do enough for me.
yeah. and this is like for back to the gate analogy, this is someone breaking down your gate or climbing over your gate, right?
This is a good boundary buster.
This is a boundary buster.
So if you're a compliant person, we've probably all come
Yeah.
across controllers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard when you're compliant because the controllers like to seek people that are compliant because they always get what they want, right?
Yeah, and it's probably not malicious. It's just it's like
it's
a
how they're
dynamic
used to
that
getting
works.
things. It's how they're used to getting
It's
things.
just-
Yeah, it works for them.
Yep.
And it's not.
And for both of them.
Yeah, for both of them, really. Yeah,
And
you're
I
right.
would say, honestly, your dad was probably more that personality type before we really started healing.
Yeah.
And I was the other. But they both have insidious problems.
Yeah.
Because, well, I will say my compliancy, I would be the martyr, right? And be upset that he would be kind of controlling. But I also enabled it,
Yeah.
right? By just my constant complicity,
Absolutely.
enabled it.
Makes sense. And those two are infamously linked together. But the fourth boundary problem that I want to go over is non-responsives, and they can't hear yes. And that means, they don't hear the needs of others in their relationships or their friendships. They don't hear the needs, and they don't partake in their responsibility to love others. So for the gate example, this would be, they would just not even interact with the gate at all, right? These, like, say you're in a relationship and your partner says that they need you right now to be with you because they're having a hard time. A non-responsive person in the relationship would be like, you're good, you'll figure it out, let's go to bed. They're not partaking in the responsibility to have a vulnerable moment or a helpful moment for their partner, and it's kind of like a gray line, you know what I mean? Because if you go too far the other way, you could be a compliant person, right?
Right.
Because you can't or you struggle with yes, right? And it's like avoidant kind of a problem, right?
Right.
It's similar to avoiding in that way.
Wow.
So that's a lot of information to take in. But these are the four boundary problems that you're going to see. And I'll put up a diagram. Basically, compliance can't say no, avoidance can't say yes, controllers can't hear no, and non-responsive can't hear yes.
All right.
Yeah, a lot of information. So
It is. It is.
enjoy. Do with that as you will.
I kind of already talked about some of my relationships in the introduction of this, but I'll just say, let's talk about some maybe defining moments of some lack of boundaries in our relationship. So I could say, like, I've been compliant in the past. Dad has been also a compliant probably with me. Like, we kind of seem like we might move in and out of some of these. Is that common?
Yeah. So like when you see this like graph for the first time, or like you see these boundary problems for the first time, I'll be like, oh, I'm that one.
Yep.
But in reality, I've probably been all four. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like a black and white situation. It's very gray, very fluid to be in each of those boundary problems.